she stepped into a world that was never meant for her. The golden chandeliers, silk gowns, and glittering jewelry became a cruel stage where her presence was an offense. Whispers trailed her every step, mocking her worn shoes and simple dress. Yet behind her quiet eyes lay years of pain, resilience, and a strength no one could see. This was the night the invisible girl would be forced into the spotlight. The hall glimmered with excess. Gold-threaded drapes cascaded from the ceiling, crystal chandeliers shimmered like captured stars, and the air itself smelled of rare wine and roses. Every guest wore finery worth more than she had ever seen in her life, and in the middle of it all, standing awkwardly at the grand doors, was the girl no one wanted to see. Her dress was plain, soft cotton faded by too many washes, stitched together by her own hand. It clung loosely, betraying the fact that she had skipped more meals than she had eaten. Her shoes, scuffed and worn, squeaked softly against the marble floor. As she stepped inside, conversations faltered. Eyes flicked toward her, some widening with disgust, others narrowing with amusement. "Who let her in?" a woman whispered. "Look at that rag!" another chuckled, hiding her laughter behind a jeweled fan. The girl kept walking, her hands clutched tightly at her sides. She had learned long ago not to respond. The stairs burned, but silence was her armor. In her mind, memories flickered like broken film reels. The orphanage with its peeling walls, nights spent huddled under thin blankets, listening to the wind slip through cracked windows. The children who avoided her because her skin was darker, her hair rougher, her voice quieter. The world had trained her well. Trained her to survive being unseen, unwanted, unchosen. But tonight, she could not hide. She had been invited, though not out of kindness. A distant relative, someone who had long disowned her, sent the invitation like a mockery, daring her to step into a world that would never embrace her. She stood near the edges of the glittering ballroom, pressed against the wall as laughter and music swirled around her. Waiters brushed past, deliberately ignoring her. A group of bridesmaids, dressed in silk the color of ivory, glanced her way and smirked. One mimicked her walk, hunching her shoulders and dragging her feet, and the others burst into cruel giggles. Her throat tightened, but she refused to cry. Not here, not in front of them. Instead, she lifted her chin slightly, just enough to see the bride across the room. Draped in diamonds, the bride glowed with arrogance, every gesture sharp, every smile calculated. And for the briefest moment, their eyes met. The bride's lips curved into a slow, mocking smirk, as if to say, "You don't belong here." The girl exhaled, steadying herself. She had lived her whole life being told she didn't belong. But tonight would be different. Tonight, she would not vanish. The celebration was in full bloom, champagne bubbling in crystal flutes, violins weaving their melodies through the air, and the bride gliding from guest to guest, basking in admiration. She was radiant, every jewel on her body flashing like a shard of victory. But victory over what? Over whom? Then she saw her. Across the room, pressed against the marble wall, stood the orphan girl. Alone, silent, out of place. The bride's painted lips curled into a smile that was anything but kind. With slow, deliberate steps, she made her way across the hall. Her heels clicked like a countdown, and the chatter of guests softened, sensing the spectacle to come. "Well, well," the bride's voice rang clear, slicing through the music. "Look who decided to join us. Did you sew that dress yourself, dear?" Laughter bubbled from nearby tables. Some guests chuckled because they wanted to please her. Others laughed because they feared the consequences of staying quiet. A few looked away, guilt prickling, but none stepped forward. The orphan lowered her gaze. Heat crawled up her neck, shame pressing like a weight on her chest. But she said nothing. Silence, as always, was safer. "Oh, don't be shy," the bride pressed on, circling her as if inspecting livestock. "Such bravery, to walk into my wedding looking like that." She gestured broadly at the girl's simple dress, then at her own gown dripping with pearls. The crowd roared louder this time. The orphan's fingers dug into her palms, hidden in the folds of her skirt. Her heart pounded, her vision blurred, but her spine stiffened. She would not give them tears. Behind them, near the altar, the groom stood frozen. His jaw tightened, his eyes locked on the scene, but his lips remained sealed. Guests watched him too, waiting to see if he would laugh along or if he would dare to intervene. But he did neither. His silence was its own betrayal. The bride leaned closer, her perfume suffocating. "You don't belong here," she whispered, though her voice carried far enough for the crowd to hear. "And you never will." A hush fell, followed by a ripple of cruel laughter that rolled like thunder through the hall. For a moment, the orphan girl felt herself shrinking, collapsing inward. The mocking faces blurred. The chandeliers above seemed to sway, and the ground beneath her feet threatened to give way. But then, through the haze, her gaze steadied on the groom. His face betrayed something no one else noticed: guilt, anguish, and a storm building behind his eyes. The hall roared with laughter, cruel and merciless, until one sound cut through it like a blade. Enough. The groom's voice wasn't loud, but it carried with the weight of finality. The music stuttered to a stop. Glasses froze halfway to lips. All eyes turned to him, the man who had stood silent too long. His gaze locked on the bride first, hard and unflinching, then shifted to the trembling figure by the wall. The orphan girl stood like a shadow, her dignity in tatters, yet her eyes still smoldered with something stronger than shame. "I will not stand by and watch this," the groom said. His voice quivered, not with weakness, but with rage barely restrained. "You all mock her as if she were nothing, but you know nothing of who she is, or what she's done." A ripple of unease passed through the guests. Laughter died into murmurs. The bride's painted smile faltered. "What are you doing?" she hissed through clenched teeth, stepping closer to him. The groom ignored her. He stepped forward, his eyes never leaving the orphan. "Years ago, when I had nothing, no name, no wealth, no hope, I was on the streets. I was starving, broken, invisible. And it was her who found me." Gasps scattered across the room. "She gave me food when she herself had none. She sat with me when no one else would come near. She told me I mattered when the world spat in my face." His voice thickened with emotion. "Do you understand? If not for her, I would not be alive. If not for her, I would not be the man standing before you today." The bride's smirk faltered into disbelief. "You can't be serious," she whispered. But her words were drowned by the murmurs swelling in the crowd. The groom turned to the guests, his chest heaving. "And yet you laugh. You laugh at the very soul who carried me when I could not stand. You laugh at a woman whose worth outshines all the diamonds in this hall." The orphan girl's lips parted, as if to speak, but no sound came. Her heart pounded, her breath shallow, overwhelmed by the storm breaking around her. The bride's hand trembled at her side, her eyes darting between her guests and the groom. Fear crept into her polished mask. She had built her world on arrogance, and now, in a few words, he was tearing it apart. The groom drew a deep breath, his voice steadying. "But that is not all. There is something more, something none of you know, something that will change everything you believe about tonight." The groom's eyes swept across the sea of glittering faces, and when he spoke, his words rang with finality. "You see me standing here, clothed in wealth and respect, but none of it would exist without her. Without the girl you ridiculed tonight, I would not be alive. I would not be your groom. I would not be a man at all." A ripple of disbelief tore through the guests. Chairs creaked, pearls clinked against crystal, but no one dared to interrupt. He turned toward the orphan girl, his voice breaking with memory. "On the night I nearly ended my life, she found me. A stranger, hungry herself, yet she gave me bread. I was covered in mud, branded worthless, but she looked at me and said I was worth saving. Her words pulled me back when the world wanted me gone." Gasps erupted. Some women covered their mouths, others lowered their eyes in shame. The laughter that had filled the hall minutes before seemed obscene now, like a stain too heavy to ignore. The bride staggered back, her jeweled gown suddenly a costume too heavy to bear. This is ridiculous," she spat, but her voice cracked, thin and desperate. "No," the groom said firmly, his tone slicing through her denial. "What is ridiculous is cruelty paraded as power. What is shameful is mocking someone whose courage outweighs every ounce of gold in this room." The orphan girl's breath trembled. Her eyes glistened, but not with humiliation. For the first time, the weight pressing on her chest began to lift. One by one, the guests shifted, heads lowered, hands clenched around glasses that suddenly felt like shackles. The same mouths that had laughed moments ago now whispered apologies, only to themselves. The bride's face hardened into a mask, but her power was gone. Stripped of applause, she stood exposed, her arrogance collapsing under the weight of truth. The groom stepped closer to the orphan, his voice softening though the hall still clung to every word. "You have all seen her as an outsider, but to me she is the reason I am here. Her dignity has carried me further than wealth or lineage ever could." The chandeliers above flickered, casting shadows across a hall that had turned from theater to courtroom. Justice had not come with gavel or decree, but with truth laid bare, and in that truth, the orphan girl stood taller than any diamond in the hall, her quiet strength radiant, unshakable.